Welcome back to How China Works. I'm Yingying Li, your host.
And I'm Brendan Davis, your other host.
And today we're going to learn about the concept of 面子, or what in English is called face.
Face is really at the heart of the most crucial dealings you're going to have with Chinese people. And it's also a complete mystery to most foreigners like me, so I'm eager to get into this one. One thing to say right up front is that this is not equivalent to guilt, which is a common misperception in the West, right, Ying?
Right. I can tell you've been really paying attention to what I'm teaching you.
Well, that's because as we share information, I'm also trying to give you the best face possible.
Oh, very nice. Actually, giving face is a deep game China skill, so I'm very happy that you're developing it. Most beginners should just start with not making people lose face, though, and then build up from there. But we'll talk about both.
We'll also look at the ancient Chinese concept called, in my bad pronunciation, Sangang Wuchang, which we have Confucius to thank for, and that will go a long way towards explaining what this is all about.
And before we're done, you can tell me what you mean by this concept China flexible.
All right, good deal. So let's get to it. Okay, Yingying, my term this week is easy to understand, so can I get that out of the way first?
I'm all ears.
All right, now there's no specific person to credit for the term China flexible, but it's something most foreigners with lots of China experience understand very well, and they may even have their own term for this. It essentially means that in order to function smoothly here, where it's obviously not your home, you must be willing to do more of the bending if you want to maintain harmony while also getting things done. And understanding and respecting face culture is a big key to this. Can you break it down for us?
Sure. Let's start with what it is and why it is important. Then we'll talk about how to deal with it. 面子, or face, is associated with shame. It's an external quality and something that is lost or gained in front of other people. It's not internal like guilt, as you mentioned, and isn't something you can actually give yourself. You can lose it or make others lose it by your actions in front of them, but you can only give it to others. They, in turn, can give it to you or make you lose it.
There's a special term for losing face that's sometimes used called breaking face, which indicates it's pretty bad to do that or make someone else do it. How important is it to get this right in Chinese communications?
It is super important. Making others lose face, even by accident, is a grave error in Chinese society. And the fastest way to lose face yourself and make others lose face is to lose your temper in a Chinese meeting or conversation.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've learned this the hard way myself back in my earlier China days, and I have a question about that. Coming from a Western perspective, which starts with the individual and maintaining our own self-respect, which then extends outward to how someone is viewed in society, I can understand how acting badly would make me lose face. But how does my losing my temper also cause the other person to lose face too?
Well, this is where we meet esteemed sage Confucius and learn a key teaching of his called 三纲五常. This is actually a huge topic, but in brief, it refers to the 3 cardinal guidelines and 5 constant virtues.
As I understand it, this was part of the ancient feudal ethical code for right conduct, yes?
Yes, that's it. We'll come back to this throughout the series, but today we'll focus on just 三纲 part, the 3 cardinal guidelines.
These established how the hierarchy of ancient society worked, starting with the emperor.
Yes, power and authority flowed downward. First, from the emperor to his subordinates, then from the father to the eldest son, and finally, from husband to his wife.
That last one sounds especially ancient to a modern ear, but this is history we're talking about, so we'll have to grade it on a little bit of a curve for now.
Yes, that's true. But the emperor-subordinate relationship is directly related to the boss-employee relationship today. In ancient times, questioning or challenging the authority of the emperor in any way usually didn't end well for people. And the same idea carries over to today. If you lose your temper, you're also disrespecting the authority of your boss by doing so in front of them in their domain, which breaks or causes them to lose face.
Okay, I can get that. But why is this so important to other aspects of daily life outside of a more traditional office? Can you give some examples from your experiences as a modern Chinese woman?
Sure, but before we get into it, let me say that there is a big learning curve to getting this right, especially if you were wired like I was as a kid.
Let me guess, were you precocious and opinionated? Tell me a story.
You said it, not me. But yes, sadly, I do have plenty of them from family and schools as well as work and business.
I'm listening with open ears and an open mind.
Understand that even since childhood, I, like all Chinese kids, of course had the traditional hierarchical values reinforced to me, but I was born naturally curious. And my way of learning about the world was basically to question everyone about everything.
I'm guessing this didn't always go well at home.
Well, let's say that I love and respect my father, but I have way too many examples from childhood that illustrate this. Sometimes we would be outside in public and my dad would tell me something that I didn't understand or agree with. I would start my reply with, I don't think it's like that. And he'd get really angry. When that happened, there was one vein on his forehead that would pop out and just throw up with anger. So I gave him a little bad face as a result of my behavior. It made for some pretty tricky moments growing up in central China, but it also made me who I am today in the greater world. So it's a hard thing to reconcile.
And that really shows how the Eastern versus Western family cultures are so different. Something that's consistent with the most enlightened parenting styles in the West are that they require respect for the parents, but they also demand that children ask questions and learn to think for themselves. The ideal world goal is to develop independence of thought at an early age, but to make sure that the learning and wisdom of parents and elders is also respected.
So how is that working out for you guys?
Well, it's a worthy target, but it's a pretty hard balance to get right, apparently. And there are countless examples of it going wrong back home, too, especially in many underfunded public schools where the inmates run the asylum, as the saying goes. So how does it work in the school system here?
From kindergarten through grad school here, there are many ways a student can cause teacher to lose face. Skipping a class or questioning the teacher in any way is considered very bad sometimes.
I've seen that in action myself. Back home in LA, I spent time between projects teaching in an international master's program, and the single hardest thing for many of the Chinese kids to get adjusted to was that we not only wanted them to ask questions, but that we actually required it. And we cared about their opinions too, even when they were still learning and weren't yet able to offer the most complete or perfect answers. In that system, in many ways, it really is the thought that counts, or even just sharing one in the first place.
Things are changing now, and in the major cities becoming a little more like international style, but that makes sense for where and when I grew up. Back then, even just sharing your own opinions and looking for feedback in a more traditional Chinese school, it's a situation where the teacher could easily lose face. So being aware of that is, as I said earlier, super important.
For my part, I've seen how being impatient and trying to push a conversation forward isn't a great approach in China either. At best, it breaks the rapport, and at worst, it can ruin a deal pretty fast. And being told to not ask questions as they occur to you is a hard thing to swallow for someone who's not from here.
I know, but in a typical Chinese business meeting, like the one you described earlier, an employee isn't expected to share opinions without being asked by the boss because of the priority of maintaining a harmonious culture. It is possible that you might raise an issue your boss hasn't considered in front of other people, and him not being able to answer it well would make him lose face.
So let me make sure I understand this. Asking a question of someone in authority can make them lose face because it is perceived as a challenge to their authority, right?
Exactly.
Okay, so let's talk about the flip side of this, namely preserving or giving face. Now, this seems like a great skill to develop in order to bank a little goodwill for when you need it.
It really is. Giving face is an asset that can be treated to develop guanxi, which is the real currency of business here.
And we will definitely talk a lot about guanxi on other shows. For today, though, remember that adjusting yourself as needed to the local style as much as you can will help facilitate understanding and get the most things done.
Do you have an example of giving or receiving face that you'd like to share? Have you seen a fellow Westerner do this well in China?
I do. I brought a friend to have tea at my old company and meet my Chinese CEO. Now, this friend has lived and worked here for 25 years. He's totally fluent and very sophisticated, actually, in Chinese language and culture, and he understands face very well. When the CEO asked him about our friendship, my friend said the nicest and most sincere things about me, and now we had this deep relationship, like brothers. He really gave me a lot of face that day, and I tried to return the favor.
I think that he also gave a lot of face to your CEO as well, right? By honoring his employee and even just by making the trip to your office, he has showed a lot of respect. It sounds like he is natural at this.
He really is. Now, Yingying, as you said earlier, you weren't naturally wired to perfectly fit into this paradigm yourself, and you really had to find your own place in the world. How did you do that?
Well, that's a story of my whole life, so it's a long one. A big part of my learning to relate to other types of people meant that I have to let go of certain cultural traditions when I'm outside of China or when dealing with international people. But then when I am with my friends and family from back home, I do my best to relate to them in the way that make them feel most comfortable and respected.
So I guess that being China flexible applies to Chinese people too sometimes.
It sure does, more than you even know.
All right. Well, we have lots more to discuss, but this was a great start. Thanks, Yingying.
So are you feeling more clear about 面子 or face now?
I am, thanks. And how do you pronounce that concept from Confucius again?
三纲五常. Do those hierarchical guidelines help make sense of where all this came from?
They do. It's very useful. It makes the situations we discussed, from home life to school to work, more relatable and easier to understand.
Our other show this week will look at how trust works in Chinese society and how foreigners can develop close bonds with their friends and colleagues here.
We'll also talk about how some of the most successful Chinese business leaders here, like Jack Ma, decided not to worry so much about losing face in the very beginning of their careers in order to take the risks they needed to do to build them in the first place.
And we will look at how all of these conventions are shifting and changing along with the generational changes too.
I can't wait. Thanks again for listening. I'm Brendan Davis.
And I'm Yingying Li. See you next time on How China Works.